The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Brianna Washington sat alone in the law firm's conference room at 11:47 p.m. Her beautiful brown skin glowed under the harsh white lighting as she squinted at the contract pages scattered across the mahogany table. What she had discovered in Clause 47B made her stomach turn cold with dread. Pierce Industries planned to eliminate 12,000 jobs through a legal loophole buried deep in their merger agreement. The contract was brilliant in its cruelty, using technical language to hide the devastating truth. Thousands of families would lose their income, their homes, their futures. Also, the company could increase profits by 30%. Her hands trembled as she photographed the damning pages with her phone. As a paralegal, she had no business being in here this late, but her curiosity about the biggest case of her career had gotten the better of her. Now she held evidence of something terrible, something that would destroy lives. The elevator chimed in the distance. Brianna's heart pounded as she heard expensive shoes clicking against marble floors. Someone was coming. She quickly gathered the papers, trying to put them back in order, but her sweaty palms made the task impossible. "Working late, Miss Washington?" The deep voice made her jump. Jonathan Pierce stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling the entrance. Even at midnight, the 32-year-old CEO looked perfect in his tailored navy suit. His blonde hair was slightly messy, and his blue eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Mr. Pierce," she managed, her voice barely steady. "I was just reviewing documents for Mr. Harrison." He stepped into the room, his gaze falling on the contract pages. A slow smile spread across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, you found the real contract. The one my lawyers thought they hid so well." Brianna's mouth went dry. She had been caught red-handed, and now this powerful man could destroy her career with a single phone call. Her grandmother needed those medical bills paid, and jobs like this were impossible to find. "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Clause 47B is designed to eliminate thousands of jobs." Jonathan's smile instantly faded. His expression turned serious as he moved closer, studying her face. "You understand exactly what you're looking at, don't you?" "I understand that families will lose everything because of this contract," Brianna replied, her voice growing stronger despite her fear. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Jonathan's eyes never left her face as he processed her words. Finally, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Miss Washington, we need to talk. What would you do if you discovered a secret that could save thousands of jobs but destroy your own career? Drop a comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more heart-pounding stories like this one." Brianna expected to be escorted out by security within minutes. Instead, Jonathan Pierce studied her with an expression she couldn't read. The conference room felt smaller with him in it, his presence commanding despite his relaxed posture. "How long have you worked at Harrison, Mills, and Associates?" he asked, his tone conversational rather than threatening. 14 months, she replied carefully. "I started right after finishing my paralegal certification." "And you live where?" "A small apartment in Queens with my grandmother." Brianna wasn't sure why she was answering his questions, but something in his manner put her slightly at ease. Jonathan nodded slowly. "Your grandmother is sick." It wasn't a question. Brianna's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you?" "I make it my business to know about people who work on my cases. Elena Washington, age 74, diabetes and heart complications. Medical bills approximately $15,000 behind." Heat rose in Brianna's cheeks. The fact that this wealthy man knew about her personal struggles felt invasive and embarrassing. "That's none of your business." "Actually, it might be exactly my business." Jonathan leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Washington." Brianna's first instinct was to refuse whatever he was about to offer. Nothing good ever came from deals made at midnight in empty office buildings. But her grandmother's tired face flashed in her mind, along with the stack of unpaid medical bills on their kitchen table. "I'm listening," she said quietly. "I need a personal legal advisor. Someone sharp enough to catch things like Clause 47B, someone who isn't afraid to speak truth to power." He paused, studying her reaction. The position pays 3 times what you make here, plus full medical benefits for you and any dependents. Brianna's breath caught. That salary would not only cover her grandmother's medical expenses but would change their entire quality of life. It seemed too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "What's the catch?" she asked. 3-month contract. You work directly with me on all major business decisions. You live on my estate in Westchester, so you're available when needed. His voice remained steady and professional. "And you help me fix that contract you found tonight." "Fix it how?" "Find a way to restructure the merger that maintains our profit margins without destroying those jobs." Jonathan's expression softened slightly. "I built my company to create opportunities, not eliminate them. Sometimes my lawyers get too creative for their own good." Brianna stared at him in disbelief. "You want to save those jobs?" "I want to run a profitable business that doesn't destroy communities in the process. I believe you can help me find that balance." The offer was incredible, almost unbelievable. Every instinct told her to be suspicious, but the sincerity in his voice seemed genuine. More importantly, she desperately needed the money. "I would accept your offer with gratitude, Mr. Pierce," she said formally. "Jonathan," he corrected with a small smile. "If we're going to be working closely together, we should use first names. Then call me Brianna." He stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to Pierce Industries, Brianna. I think this partnership is going to benefit both of us." As she shook his hand, Brianna wondered what she was getting herself into. But with her grandmother's health on the line, she was willing to take the risk. The Pierce estate sprawled across 20 acres of perfectly manicured lawns in Westchester County. Brianna pressed her face to the car window as they drove through the iron gates, past gardens that looked like something from a magazine. The main house was a massive colonial structure with white columns and countless windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. "The guest house is back here," Jonathan said, directing their path along a winding stone walkway. The guest house turned out to be larger than any apartment Brianna had ever lived in. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a living room with a fireplace, and windows that looked out over a small pond. Everything was decorated in soft blues and whites, creating a peaceful atmosphere that made her shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. "This is too much," she said softly, running her fingers along the granite countertops in the kitchen. "It's practical," Jonathan replied, setting her suitcases down in the main room. "I keep irregular hours, and sometimes will need to work late into the night. Having you close by makes sense." He walked to the large windows facing the main house. "My mother lives in the main house with her nurse. You'll meet her soon. She has some challenges, but she's looking forward to having a new face around." Something in his tone made Brianna look at him more carefully. Despite his confident demeanor, she caught a glimpse of worry in his eyes when he mentioned his mother. "What kind of challenges?" she asked gently. "Early-stage dementia. Some days are better than others." His voice was carefully controlled. "She gets lonely in that big house, even with the nurse there." Brianna felt a pang of sympathy. Her own grandmother had struggled with memory issues before her current health crisis, so she understood the helpless feeling that came with watching someone you love fade away. "I'd like to meet her," she said. Jonathan's expression brightened slightly. "She'd like that. Fair warning though, she might not remember you the next day." "That's okay. My grandmother forgets things too sometimes." They spent the next hour going over her new responsibilities. Brianna would review all major contracts and business decisions, attend important meetings, and help develop strategies for ethical business practices. The scope of her new role was both exciting and terrifying. "There's one more thing," Jonathan said as they finished the tour. "Tomorrow we're having dinner with the board members who pushed for that problematic clause. I need you there to help me present our alternative solution." Brianna nodded, then hesitated. "Jonathan, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you really hire me?" "You could have found any number of experienced lawyers to help with this." He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the perfectly maintained gardens. "Because you saw what others missed. Because you cared enough to speak up even when it put you at risk. And because—" he turned to meet her eyes. "Because I think you might be exactly what this company needs to remember its soul." The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in Brianna's chest. She pushed the feeling aside, reminding herself this was strictly business. But as she watched him walk back toward the main house, she couldn't help but notice how the afternoon light made his blonde hair shine, or how lonely he looked despite being surrounded by such luxury. Brianna spent her first morning reviewing Pierce Industries' recent contracts and financial reports. The company was incredibly successful, but she noticed a pattern of increasingly aggressive tactics over the past 2 years. It was as if someone had been pushing Jonathan toward more ruthless business practices. Around noon, she walked to the main house as Jonathan had suggested. A kind-faced woman in her 50s answered the door. "You must be Brianna," the woman said warmly. "I'm Catherine, Mrs. Pierce's nurse. She's been asking about the pretty girl Jonathan mentioned." Eleanor Pierce sat in a sunroom filled with natural light, working on a jigsaw puzzle. She looked up when Brianna entered, her blue eyes sharp and alert. "You're the lawyer," Eleanor said with a smile. "Jonathan told me you're very smart." "I'm a paralegal, actually," Brianna corrected gently, taking a seat across from the older woman. "But I try my best. He needs someone smart around here. Too many people just tell him what they think he wants to hear." Eleanor's voice carried the wisdom of her 70 years. "Are you going to tell him the truth, even when it's hard?" "Yes, I am." Eleanor studied her face carefully. "Good. He's been making some terrible decisions lately. Ever since his father died, people have been taking advantage of his grief." The pieces began falling into place for Brianna. Jonathan's father had died 2 years ago, right around the time the company's practices became more aggressive. Someone had been manipulating a grieving son into believing harsh business tactics were necessary. Who's been advising him? Brianna asked carefully. The board members. Especially that Harrison man. Eleanor's expression darkened. They keep telling him he needs to be stronger and more decisive. They say his father would have made the tough choices. Mr. Harrison, the senior partner at her old law firm, was on Pierce Industries' board. Suddenly, Brianna understood why she had access to those contracts. Harrison wanted her to find that clause and expose it, probably to embarrass Jonathan and gain more control over the company. "Mrs. Pierce," she said gently, "I think your son is a good man who's been getting bad advice." "I think so too," Eleanor replied, her eyes growing misty. "But some days I can't remember things clearly enough to help him. Some days I can't remember much of anything." Brianna reached over and took the older woman's hand. "On the days when you can't remember other things, try to remember this. Your son loves you very much, and is trying his best." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Will you help him?" "Yes, I will." That evening, Jonathan found Brianna in the guest house, surrounded by legal documents and financial reports. "How was your day with my mother?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "She's wonderful. And she's worried about you." Brianna set down her pen and looked at him directly. "Jonathan, I think someone has been manipulating you since your father died." His jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" "The aggressive business practices, the push for maximum profits at any cost, that's not who you are. But it's exactly what someone would advise if they wanted to make you look ruthless and unpopular with your own employees." Jonathan was quiet for a long time, processing her words. Finally, he said, "I've been wondering the same thing. But I didn't know who I could trust." "You can trust me," Brianna said simply. "And you can trust yourself. Your instincts were right about that contract." For the first time since she'd met him, Jonathan's carefully controlled mask slipped. She saw the uncertainty and pain he'd been hiding, the weight of responsibility he'd been carrying alone. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing what I couldn't see myself." Over the next 2 weeks, Brianna and Jonathan worked together to restructure the problematic merger. She discovered that the original contract could be modified to create a gradual transition plan, retraining workers instead of laying them off immediately. The solution would cost more upfront but would save the company millions in unemployment claims and negative publicity. Their work sessions often stretched late into the night, and Brianna found herself looking forward to their conversations. Jonathan was nothing like the cold businessman she had expected. He was thoughtful, funny, and genuinely cared about his employees' welfare. Try this, he said one evening, appearing in the guest house with 2 cups of coffee and a bag from the local bakery. You don't have to keep bringing me food, Brianna protested, but she accepted the coffee gratefully. I'm not doing it because I have to, he replied, settling into what had become his usual chair. I'm doing it because I want to. There was something in his tone that made her look up from her legal documents. His blue eyes were warm as they studied her face, and she felt that fluttering sensation in her chest again. How's your grandmother doing? He asked, smoothly changing the subject. Much better, thanks to the insurance benefits. Brianna couldn't keep the gratitude out of her voice. She started the new medication last week. The doctor says her numbers are improving. I'm glad. Jonathan's smile was genuine. She raised you well. She did. After my parents died in that car accident when I was 12, she gave up everything to take care of me. Brianna's voice grew soft with memory. She worked 2 jobs to put me through school, never complained, never made me feel like a burden. She sounds like an amazing woman. She is. She taught me that success means nothing if you don't use it to help other people. Brianna looked at Jonathan directly. I think she'd like you. Because I'm helping her granddaughter? Because you're willing to do the right thing even when it costs you money. Their eyes met across the small table, and the air between them seemed to shift. Brianna felt drawn to him in a way that had nothing to do with business or contracts or financial arrangements. Jonathan was a good man who had lost his way, and somehow she had been able to help him find it again. Brianna, he said softly, I want you to know that working with you, it's been the best part of my day for weeks now. Her heart skipped a beat. Jonathan. I know it's complicated. I know I'm your employer and this could create problems. He leaned forward slightly. But I need you to know how I feel. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, her best friend. Girl, you've been MIA for weeks. Everything okay? The interruption broke the spell, reminding Brianna of all the complications that came with getting involved with her boss. But as she looked at Jonathan's hopeful expression, she realized it might be too late to worry about complications. Are you feeling the tension between them? What do you think will happen next? Subscribe and hit the bell for more emotional stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The following Saturday, Brianna was surprised when Jonathan knocked on her door carrying a picnic basket. I thought you might like to see more of the grounds, he said, looking almost shy. It's a beautiful day, and you've been working too hard. The estate gardens were even more spectacular up close. Jonathan led her to a quiet spot by the pond where an old wooden bench sat under a massive oak tree. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow on the water. This was my favorite spot when I was a kid, he said as they sat down. I used to come here whenever my parents fought or when school got overwhelming. It's peaceful, Brianna agreed, watching a family of ducks glide across the water. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Brianna learned that Jonathan had originally wanted to be a teacher, but had felt obligated to take over the family business after his father's heart attack. He discovered that she had always dreamed of being a lawyer but couldn't afford law school after her grandmother's illness began. What if I helped you go to law school? He asked suddenly. Brianna looked at him in surprise. You've already done too much for me. I haven't done anything except recognize your talent and pay you what you're worth. His voice was earnest. You have the mind of a brilliant lawyer, Brianna. You shouldn't let financial circumstances hold you back. I can't accept any more help from you, she said softly. People would think what? That I'm investing in exceptional talent. That I believe in you. His words made her chest tight with emotion. No one had ever believed in her potential the way Jonathan did. Her grandmother loved her, but had always encouraged her to be practical and realistic about her limitations. Why are you being so good to me? She asked. Jonathan turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense in the dappled sunlight. Because you walked into my life and reminded me who I used to be. Because you see problems as opportunities to help people instead of obstacles to profit. Because. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. Because I'm falling for you, and I can't pretend otherwise anymore. Brianna's breath caught. She should pull away, should remind him about professional boundaries and power dynamics. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch. "This is complicated," she whispered. "The best things usually are," he replied, his thumb tracing along her cheek. When he kissed her, it was gentle and tentative at first, as if he was giving her time to change her mind. But when she kissed him back, her hand fisting in his shirt to pull him closer, the kiss deepened into something that felt inevitable. They broke apart breathless, foreheads touching as they processed what had just happened. "I should feel guilty about this," Brianna said softly. "But you don't." "No. I don't." She looked into his eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there. "This isn't about the job or the money or any of that. This is about you and me. Just you and me," he agreed, pressing another soft kiss to her lips. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Brianna felt like her life had shifted into something completely new. She was falling for a man who saw her potential and believed in her dreams. For the first time in years, the future felt bright with possibility. Over the next week, Brianna and Jonathan were careful to maintain their professional demeanor during business hours. But their stolen moments together, coffee breaks that turned into conversations about everything and nothing, casual touches that lingered a beat too long, made it clear that something fundamental had changed between them. Eleanor Pierce noticed immediately. "You look happier," she observed during one of Brianna's daily visits. Her memory was sharp today, and her blue eyes twinkled with mischief. "Jonathan looks happier too. We've been working well together," Brianna said carefully. Eleanor's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled. "He hasn't brought a girl home since college. I was beginning to think he'd given up on finding someone." "Mrs. Pierce." Eleanor, the older woman, corrected. "And don't worry, dear. I approve. You barely know me. I know enough." Eleanor set down her knitting and looked at Brianna seriously. "I know you make my son smile again. I know you treat an old woman with dementia like she still has value. I know you're helping him remember the kind of man his father raised him to be." Tears pricked at Brianna's eyes. Acceptance from Jonathan's mother meant more than she had realized it would. "Some days I forget things," Eleanor continued, "but I always remember feelings. And I can feel that you love him." That evening, Rebecca Martinez arrived for her promised visit, armed with takeout containers and pointed questions. "Okay, spill," she demanded the moment they were alone in the guest house. "You've been dodging my calls for weeks, and now I find out you're living on some billionaire's estate?" "It's not like that," Brianna protested, but her friend's raised eyebrow suggested she wasn't buying it. "Amham. And I suppose you have a perfectly professional explanation for why you're glowing like a woman in love." Brianna sighed and told Rebecca everything, from the midnight discovery of the contract to the kiss by the pond. Her friend listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of understanding. "So let me get this straight," Rebecca said when Brianna finished. "This man offered you a job that solved your financial problems, respected your intelligence enough to trust you with major business decisions, is helping you save thousands of jobs, treats his elderly mother with patience and love, and makes you feel like the brilliant woman you are? When you put it like that, girl, where's the problem?" Rebecca grinned. "I was expecting to have to talk you out of some sugar daddy situation. Instead, I find out you've landed yourself a genuine good man who sees your worth. But he's my boss, Rebecca. People will think I slept my way into this position. People will think whatever they want to think regardless of what you do." Rebecca's voice grew serious. "The question is whether you're going to let other people's opinions keep you from being happy with a man who clearly adores you." Later that night, as Rebecca prepared to drive back to the city, she pulled Brianna aside. "I've known you for 8 years," she said quietly. "I've never seen you look at a man the way you look at him. And I've definitely never seen a man look at you the way he does. How does he look at me? Like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life." After Rebecca left, Brianna found Jonathan waiting in the main house's kitchen, 2 cups of tea growing cold on the counter. "How did it go with your friend?" he asked. "She likes you," Brianna said simply. "She thinks I should stop overthinking and just be happy." Jonathan smiled and pulled her into his arms. "Smart woman. I like her already." As he held her close, Brianna realized that for the first time in her adult life, she felt completely supported. Not just financially, but emotionally, intellectually, and romantically. It was a feeling she never wanted to lose. Monday morning brought devastating news. Pierce Industries was facing a hostile takeover attempt by Meridian Corp, a ruthless company known for acquiring businesses and stripping them for parts. They had quietly bought up 28% of Pierce Industries stock and were now making moves to seize control of the board. "They're using our ethical restructuring plan against us," Jonathan said grimly as he spread financial documents across the conference table. "They're claiming to investors that I'm too soft to run a profitable company." Brianna studied the takeover documents with growing anger. Meridian's plan was exactly what she had feared: massive layoffs, plant closures, and the elimination of employee benefits. Everything she and Jonathan had worked to prevent. "This is Harrison's doing," she said, pointing to the legal language in the hostile bid. "This phrasing is identical to the contracts he writes." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "My own board member is orchestrating a takeover. Think about it." He pushed for the aggressive contract terms, knowing they would make you look ruthless. When you chose the ethical path instead, he probably convinced Meridian you were weak and ripe for takeover. Over the next 72 hours, Brianna barely left the conference room. She pored over corporate law books, searching for any legal avenue that might stop the takeover. Jonathan worked alongside her, making calls to loyal shareholders and trying to secure emergency funding to buy back stock. "There has to be something," she muttered, rubbing her tired eyes as she flipped through another legal manual. "Brianna, you need to sleep," Jonathan said, looking up from his own stack of documents. It was 3 a.m, and they had been working for 18 straight hours. "I can't sleep when 12,000 jobs are at stake," she replied, turning another page. "And I can't let you destroy your health trying to save my company." She looked at him across the table, seeing the exhaustion and worry etched in his features. Despite his own stress, he was concerned about her well-being. "It's not just your company anymore," she said softly. "It's our company. These are our employees." Something shifted in Jonathan's expression. The way she said "our" seemed to give him strength. "Then we fight this together," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. At dawn, Brianna found the answer buried in a 100-year-old corporate law precedent. If Pierce Industries could prove that the takeover attempt was based on fraudulent information or insider manipulation, they could invalidate any stock purchases made under false pretenses. "We need to prove Harrison deliberately sabotaged your reputation to enable this takeover," she explained, her exhaustion forgotten in her excitement. "How do we do that?" "We show that he knew about your ethical restructuring plan but still advised Meridian that you were financially irresponsible. We demonstrate a pattern of him pushing you toward decisions that would hurt the company's image." Jonathan smiled for the first time in days. "You're brilliant." "We're brilliant," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without understanding your vision for the company." The suspense is building. Will they save the company and their love? Comment your predictions and subscribe so you never miss these incredible stories like this one. With 48 hours until the crucial shareholder vote, Brianna and Jonathan worked frantically to build their case against Harrison. They had phone records showing his communications with Meridian executives, documented evidence of his poor advice leading to questionable business decisions, and testimony from several board members who were disturbed by his aggressive tactics. "I think we have enough," Brianna said, organizing the final documents. "The SEC investigation should be sufficient to delay the takeover until we can prove fraud." Jonathan nodded, but she noticed he seemed distracted. Throughout the morning, he kept checking his phone and glancing at the clock. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," he said quickly. "Just thinking about next steps." That afternoon, Jonathan disappeared for several hours, claiming he had meetings with investors. When he returned, he seemed nervous and excited at the same time. "Brianna, I need to tell you something," he began as they wrapped up their work for the day. Before he could continue, his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Pierce. The board meeting is ready to begin." "Already?" Jonathan looked flustered. Yes, of course." The emergency board meeting was tense and formal. Harrison sat at the far end of the table, his expression coldly professional as Brianna presented their evidence of his misconduct. Several board members looked shocked as the pattern of manipulation became clear. "These are serious accusations," Harrison said when she finished. "I've been trying to protect this company from Jonathan's naive idealism. By orchestrating its destruction?" Brianna shot back. The vote to remove Harrison from the board and report his actions to the SEC was unanimous among the remaining members. As he gathered his papers and left the room, Harrison caught Brianna's eye. "You think you've won," he said quietly, "but you're just a paralegal who got lucky. This won't last." His words stung, but Jonathan's firm hand on her shoulder reminded her she wasn't facing this alone. After the meeting, Jonathan seemed unusually quiet. As they walked back to his office, Brianna noticed him checking his phone again. "Jonathan, what's going on? You've been acting strange all day." "I need to take care of something," he said, not meeting her eyes. Can you meet me in my office in an hour?" Something in his tone made her stomach twist with worry. "Is this about us? About the company? Just, please trust me." 1 hour. An hour later, Brianna knocked on his office door with growing anxiety. When she entered, she found Jonathan standing by the window, staring out at the city skyline. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," he said without turning around. "About the takeover, about Harrison, about the complications of our relationship." Brianna's heart sank. This sounded like the beginning of a breakup conversation. "And I think," he continued, "that it might be best if you took a position with our Seattle office. Less complicated that way." Seattle? The word came out as a whisper. After everything they had been through together, he was transferring her across the country. It would be a promotion, of course. Senior legal counsel, significant raise. His voice sounded carefully neutral. Brianna felt like she had been slapped. "I see. It would be better for everyone involved. Everyone except me, apparently." She couldn't keep the hurt out of her voice. "I thought what we had meant something to you. Brianna." He finally turned around, and she saw something that looked like pain in his eyes. "No, I understand," she said, backing toward the door. "Business comes first. It always does." She left his office before he could say anything else, her vision blurred with tears. By the time she reached the guest house, her hurt had transformed into determination. If Jonathan wanted her gone, she would make it easy for him. Within 2 hours, she had packed her belongings and booked a flight to Atlanta, where her grandmother lived. She left her resignation letter on the kitchen counter and called a taxi to the airport. She didn't see Jonathan standing at his office window, watching her taxi disappear down the long driveway, a small velvet box forgotten in his trembling hand. Brianna sat in the departure lounge at JFK Airport, staring at her boarding pass for Atlanta. In 30 minutes, she would leave New York and never see Jonathan Pierce again. The thought made her chest ache, but she forced herself to stay strong. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Whatever happened, don't make any permanent decisions while you're emotional. Love you." Before she could reply, commotion near the gate caught her attention. People were pointing and whispering as someone pushed through the crowd. Her heart stopped when she saw Jonathan running toward her, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his tie loosened. "Brianna, wait," he called out, slightly out of breath. She stood up, her emotions warring between anger and hope. "What are you doing here?" "I'm stopping you from making the biggest mistake of my life," he said, stopping just in front of her. "Your mistake?" "I was trying to propose to you," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "The Seattle thing was supposed to be a test, to see if you would fight for us. But then I realized how cruel that was, and by the time I got to your house, you were already gone." Brianna stared at him in shock. "You were going to propose?" Jonathan dropped to one knee right there in the crowded airport lounge, pulling out a small velvet box. The other passengers began to gather around them, phones appearing to record the moment. "Brianna Washington," he said, his voice clear and strong despite his obvious nerves, "you saved my company, my relationship with my mother, and my belief in myself. You saw who I could be when I had forgotten who I was. I love your intelligence, your compassion, your courage to speak truth even when it's difficult. Tears were streaming down Brianna's face as he opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring surrounded by smaller stones that caught the airport's fluorescent lights. "Will you marry me? Will you be my partner in business and in life? Will you help me build a company that makes you proud?" The crowd around them had grown quiet, waiting for her answer. Brianna looked down at this incredible man who had changed her life in every possible way. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Jonathan. I will marry you." The airport erupted in cheers and applause as Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply. Someone shouted, "Get a room," and they both laughed through their tears. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too," she replied. "But next time you want to propose, maybe skip the fake breakup part." "Noted," he said with a grin. 6 months later, their engagement party filled the main house with laughter and music. Eleanor Pierce, having one of her clearest days in months, stood to give a toast. "When my son brought Brianna home, I knew she was special," she said, her voice strong and clear. "She didn't just save our company. She saved our family." Rebecca raised her glass with a huge smile. "To the woman who never settles for anything less than she deserves." As the party continued around them, Brianna and Jonathan stepped out onto the terrace where they had shared their first kiss. "No regrets?" he asked, pulling her close. "Only one," she said with a teasing smile. "What's that?" "I should have kissed you that first night when you caught me reading your contract." Jonathan laughed and spun her around under the bright stars. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." Pierce Industries went on to become a model for ethical business practices, with Brianna as chief legal officer after she finished law school. They saved every single one of those 12,000 jobs and proved that doing the right thing could also be profitable. But more importantly, they built a love story based on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that the best partnerships happen when two people make each other better than they ever thought they could be alone. The end.